Thank you for joining us for this special edition of KPBS News. I'm Maya Trabulsi. The number of San Diego's COVID-19 cases trended downward this week, but we still remain on a state watch list that limits many indoor businesses and activities. Here are some of the other headlines. This week, San Diego's caseload topped 31,000 since March, with more than 580 deaths. Though, as we just noted, daily new cases are down significantly from last week. SDSU pushed back its fall sports schedule, including football, to late September. And the popular Sky Show has been canceled. Now, when it comes to enforcement, a gym in Ramona became the first local business to be charged with violating the county public health order. Other communities are also taking action. KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman has this story from Del Mar.
The governor has asked all of the agencies to be proactive and to take the health order seriously. And so we are doing what our state has asked us to do.
Del Mar is beefing up enforcement and education of COVID-19 rules.
We're going to do that with extra patrol from the sheriff in our public spaces along Camino Del Mar and our parks and beaches.
Part of a new pilot program, deputies will be hitting areas with lots of people like Del Mar's beaches. Downtown Del Mar will also be part of this new targeted enforcement. Basically, the way the pilot program works is over the next 4 months, the city will get to decide when and where to use these additional sheriff's deputies. Everyone on the council agrees face coverings are important to slow the virus's spread, but not everyone likes the idea of hiring deputies to make sure people are following the rules.
I voted no to spend $22,000 on 8 hours a week of very expensive sheriff time and precious time.
Del Mar Deputy Mayor Terry Gasterland was the lone no vote and is worried about unintended consequences.
If Del Mar develops a reputation for, hey, you go to Del Mar, you're not wearing your mask, you'll get a ticket, you got to go to court, you got to pay that $1,000 fine, that could have negative consequences if we're the only city doing it. I think it'll have a potential negative effect on our businesses.
Others believe it will have a positive effect.
I think our businesses will appreciate the support and the desire that our council has to keep our community safe, because when people feel safe here, they'll go out of their homes, they'll go to the businesses, they'll go to the restaurants.
The idea is to focus enforcement on face coverings, but deputies can issue citations for any violations under state and county orders. They carry up to a $1,000 fine and/or up to 90 days in jail.
Citing and fining it's a little much. I mean, if the fine was, maybe $50.
The sheriff's department says they strive for voluntary compliance first, and most people will put on a face covering if they have to.
The more people can get away from treating this like it's a political issue, the better. It needs to be thought of as on a scientific basis and not as a political, emotional basis.
This new pilot program runs through the end of November. Part of its $22,000 price tag includes adding more signage about face coverings around the city. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
And enforcement is also an issue in the workplace. KPBS's John Carroll says California companies might soon have to tell employees if a coworker has COVID-19.
If the goal of AB 685 sounds familiar, it's because San Diego County businesses are already required to tell employees if there's a COVID outbreak at their workplace. But bill sponsor Assemblywoman Eloise Reyes says if California is going to have any chance of finally bringing the virus under control, the legislation is needed statewide.
It requires employers to provide a 24-hour notice to all employees at a work site if there is another worker who's been exposed to COVID-19.
AB 685 would also require employers to report if anyone tests positive for COVID, or if there's an order to quarantine, or if a worker dies from a cause that could be COVID-19 related. The information will have to be reported to Cal OSHA and the State Department of Public Health. The legislation is meant primarily to protect frontline workers.
Whether it's in our fields, our hospitals, grocery stores, meat packing plants, restaurant kitchens, or countless other businesses in our state.
In our communities, people have had to return to work.
San Diego Assemblywoman Lorena Gonzalez says AB 685 is crucial to stopping the spread of the virus in the Latinx community.
It will prevent our Latino communities from taking that home and exposing their families. We know that's also happening. And so this is essential, we think, to stop the bleeding really in our community.
The bill now moves to the Senate. If it passes there, it's back to the Assembly for a final look, then to the governor. Assemblywoman Reyes says she hopes to see it become law by September. John Carroll, KPBS News.
A local private school is suing Governor Newsom over his order banning in-person classes for counties that are on the state's watch list. St. Augustine, an all-boys Catholic high school in North Park, is calling the executive order discriminatory. In a statement released Thursday, the school says it provided in-person summer school and sports with no cases of COVID-19. St. Augustine is scheduled to begin its school year later this month. In South Bay, the school year kicked off Monday, and it's been a struggle for teachers and parents. They're all trying to make distance learning work, possibly for the long term. KPBS education reporter Joe Hong talked to them about the challenge ahead.
Because the teachers already went through it last semester, so I'm hoping that they're really bringing their A game this time.
Like many parents, Blanca Wines was disappointed by how distance learning went in the spring. Her 3 kids in high school had trouble focusing at home, and they weren't motivated to do their work because they weren't being graded. Now, with the South Bay District being the first in the county to start its new school year, she still has some concerns.
The teachers are supposed to be online, right? And so how are they going to engage with people? Because I know the whole social aspect of being at school is very helpful. They need that interaction with their classmates. How are they going to incorporate that into learning this semester?
Students will be graded this semester, and the district has made sure all students have the devices they need. Yet one science teacher is still worried about teaching hands-on lessons.
I do want to get everybody doing a lab where they do at home, and we're going to test how good these homemade masks are.
Michelle Mardahl teaches biology at Bonita Vista High School in Chula Vista. The summer gave her the chance to prepare lessons, but she still hasn't had the chance to test them in real time. Plus, the faces staring back at her on her computer will be new. When the pandemic first shut down schools, teachers had the benefit of already knowing their students.
I was missing just a little bit of curriculum, and then I could fill in the gaps. This is like, oh my gosh, we're starting from scratch.
Sweetwater administrators are confident instruction will be more robust this time around.
I think we're really excited actually about starting. There's a lot of work that's been done over the last few months.
Manny Rubio is the communications director at the Sweetwater Union High School District.
I think where we're different is that, in the springtime, it was a lot of really just kind of getting people through, and as far as academics, it was really more of an enrichment process. Make sure that learning kind of was in the heads of students and our staff.
Rubio added that the district will continue to serve meals to students during the school year. Meanwhile, Mardahl remains daunted despite the preparations.
I feel overwhelmed. I feel like more nervous, and I feel the responsibility is I gotta plan this right so that so that I give them the experiences and the tools that they need for the future.
Sweetwater will conduct distance learning at least until October 2nd. The district schools could reopen at that time depending on the status of COVID-19. Joe Hong, KPBS News.
Many local schools are waiting to hear from the state when they can welcome students to campus, but one district is committing to distance learning through the end of 2020. Poway Unified opted to go online only. In an email to parents, the superintendent said the new COVID-19 standards made it impossible for any San Diego schools to reopen campuses. She said the plan for distance learning through December would avoid uncertainty for families, staff, and for students. The new school year begins September 2nd. Child care providers in San Diego County can now apply for cash grants to help them stay in business. KPBS reporter Claire Tricusser says daycares and preschools across the county are struggling to stay afloat because of class size restrictions brought on by the pandemic.
The County Board of Supervisors voted unanimously this week to spend $25 million in federal CARES Act funding on grants to existing child care providers. Providers operating in the county can apply for the grants to pay for COVID-related expenses, such as cleaning supplies and extra staff. Shantae Brown, a child care provider for 22 years, called into the supervisors meeting Tuesday to say the money is badly needed.
To make sure we have PPE supplies to keep everyone safe. We will also need to ensure we can provide professional sanitation in our facilities.
Speaking through a translator, Silva Aldana says the money wouldn't just help childcare providers.
Okay, so we ask that you please continue to support us as we continue to work to support the economy and the families of all the people that are working here in the San Diego region, especially between San Diego and Tijuana.
Most daycare operators that have stayed open throughout the pandemic are losing money because of requirements that they limit class sizes to prevent outbreaks. A recent study from UC Berkeley found that in Southern California, almost 2/3 of childcare programs experienced loss of income since March. The YMCA and the San Diego Foundation will be tasked with giving out the grants. The San Diego Foundation will also be giving out $10 million in private donations over the next 5 years. A county spokesman estimated that a typical grant would be around $5,000. Claire Tregesser, KPBS News.
Scientists are not just working on potential COVID-19 vaccines. They're also studying how the virus works. KPBS science and technology reporter Shalina Chatlani shows us how a set of mini lungs developed in San Diego might provide answers.
Researchers collected stem cells from people with different racial and gender backgrounds and then grew these organoids, or small functioning organs, in petri dishes. Here you can see some tiny breathing lungs. Federal data show coronavirus disproportionately impacts people of color and men, says UC San Diego neonatologist Sandra Leibel.
What they're finding is the patients that are the sickest, there's this lung disease that patients end up on the ventilator, and it's called ARDS. And those patients that end up with ARDS and get really sick and need hospitalization as well as ventilator support are people that come from various ethnic backgrounds, mainly Latino and African American as well. And that's why we want to use our mini lungs in order to understand why this is happening.
Sanford Burnham Prebys Medical Discovery Institute biologist Evan Snyder says they are exposing the mini lungs to coronavirus and a number of promising antiviral drugs. That's not only to show biologically why the disparity exists, but also whether certain antivirals could be tweaked to help different people more effectively.
If we validated these drugs in a clinically relevant system and we saw a difference, we could just compensate for that by changing dose or dosing regime, so that anything that we discovered should be applicable to all patients across the board.
Researchers say they are now collecting the data and are also planning to look at how the virus may impact mini brains. Shalina Chatlani, KPBS News.
COVID-19 is also affecting something that only happens once a decade. The deadline for the 2020 census is being pushed up to September 30th, a month earlier than expected. KPBS reporter Max Rivlin-Nadler explains why this is a controversial move that adds more pressure to census workers.
Originally, the count was supposed to end in July, but in April, the official census count was extended to October 31st. To help census takers accommodate for social distancing during the coronavirus pandemic. On Monday, however, the Census Bureau announced that it would be cutting the counting a month short. Local organizations have been pushing for an accurate count to make sure federal funding gets to under-resourced areas. Now they're redoubling their efforts to get the word out about the census.
We still have a good foundation, and we have been putting in the work for quite a really long time, and so hopefully our communities will deliver.
Brenda Diaz is the Civic Engagement Coordinator at Mid-City CAN, which has been spearheading census efforts in City Heights. Right now, that neighborhood self-response rate is at 59.5%, with government census takers set to visit homes that haven't responded yet starting next week. For Diaz, the stakes of an undercount, especially during a pandemic, couldn't be higher.
So we're talking about trillions of dollars, right? If our communities are not counted, it's $1 trillion over the next 10 years, which we won't have for healthcare, which is currently really important, emergency services, education, or like even school meals for the future generations.
The Census Bureau says it pushed the date back to make sure all data collection is completed by the end of the year. But Diaz and other local groups working on census efforts in San Diego County believe it's an effort to purposefully drive down participation in immigrant communities.
We're used to, being disenfranchised and having to move fast. And hopefully we'll be able to make sure that we get an accurate count.
Max Adler, KPBS News.
A new jobs report is out showing nearly 2 million jobs returned to the economy in July, but that's a slowdown from the prior month. 1.8 million jobs in July brought the national unemployment rate down to 10.2%. In June, nearly 5 million jobs returned as much of the county reopened from the COVID-19 shutdown. KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman has the story of a woman in La Jolla who was trying to keep her small business afloat.
The simplest button, to the most ornate wedding dress, we do it all. This is our livelihood, and my mom started it 30 years ago. I don't want to close, and that's going to be the last resort.
Kiki's Alterations was started by now 83-year-old Kiki Spounias, who came to the United States after growing up in Greece.
I learned from Greece the tailoring. I'm very happy what I'm doing.
A lot of our clients, we actually are doing their grandkids.
Kiki's daughter Tammy has taken over majority of the responsibilities.
And now I'm more easier. I work less, I come late, I leave early.
When the pandemic first hit, Kiki shut down for 3 months.
March, April, May, busiest season. May is the biggest. That's where I make most of my income.
And you were totally closed?
We were closed, yeah.
Since reopening in June, business has been down nearly 75%.
Where income doesn't pay the rent, but I do stay open because I don't want to lose my customer base. I want to let them know that I'm here, that I'm open, that I'm ready to do work. It's just no one's traveling, no one's going anywhere.
The business did get a PPP loan, which helped cover some expenses, and the owners are applying for a county relief grant. But the possibility of closing is something weighing heavily on everyone.
Oh yeah, very much so. And sometimes I cannot sleep and I'm thinking what's going to happen the next day. Then I call Tammy, anybody came? Who have any business? Oh, Mommy, don't worry. 1 people came or 2 people came. She's excited. She's getting married. Very soon.
I do have some weddings, and which is a great treat for me.
Yeah.
Okay. I came in for my second fitting and getting ready for my wedding August 22nd, so it's coming up.
Allie Fauner and her fiance David Adams had been planning a nearly 200-person wedding for more than a year.
Yeah, it was gonna be the whole ordeal, but had to make the tough decision just to push it off for a little bit.
Now the couple is opting for a small backyard ceremony with plans for a bigger bash sometime next year.
It's different, but a lot of us are in the same boat, so yeah, it's been good.
Tammy says the majority of her clients have opted to delay their weddings, while others are going smaller.
Less groomsmen, less bridesmaids, where we get a lot of the business through the bridesmaids. And if less people are going, they're not as formal.
The pandemic has brought some other changes too. Some consultations are now done over video chat, and Tammy has pivoted to making face coverings. She says she can make them out of almost any material.
I've made masks for brides, so I use some of the fabric from their wedding dress to make them a matching mask.
With no signs of coronavirus slowing down, Kiki's has some tough months ahead of them, but they're just hoping that the whole industry, tailoring and alterations, can survive the pandemic.
There is a need for alterations. I think I just have to, stick it out probably another year, and hopefully we'll have some funding and to keep going, to keep it open, because tailor shops are needed. The clothes aren't going to mend themselves. It's a lost art.
Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
If your weekend plans include some time on the water, well, you're not alone. Recent sales of boats show many people are making that choice. RV sales are also surging. KPBS's John Carroll shows us how local recreation is getting a boost.
You really don't have time to be doing this interview right now, right?
True.
Matt Leffingwell is the Vice President and General Manager of RV Solutions in Kearney Mesa. He's been in the RV business for 25 years. He says he's never seen anything like this.
So we've literally had a wait as many as 6 people deep today on a Friday. On the weekends, it can get pretty hectic.
That scenario is playing itself out at RV dealerships across the country. Sales were already doing well. The RV Industry Association says they're up nearly 11% from June of last year, but they've really taken off since the pandemic hit.
is not just the vacation, but even just traveling. If they're going to go back and stay in New York for a month to visit family, they don't want to fly. And how else do you do it?
Another indication the pandemic is behind the jump in sales, Matt Leffingwell says they are seeing a lot of first-time buyers. But whether it's old hands or newbies, Leffingwell says the numbers are off the charts.
Probably somewhere around 100, maybe 125%. Our inventory level right now is about a little less than half of what we would normally see.
From land to sea, it's the same situation over here at Harbor Island. The business of boating is booming.
Come May 1st, the second they opened up that bay, it was just phones ringing off the hook.
Tom Bossinger is the director of sales and marketing for California Yacht Sales. He says sales are riding on a wave of demand.
It's got to be 200, maybe 300%. It is significant.
Just take a look at their website. For the most part, those little tabs in the upper left corner indicate boats that are sold or a sale is pending.
Right now, it really doesn't matter whether it's a $20,000 boat or a $200,000 boat. The second it comes onto the market, we've just got 5-6 people calling the first day it's on the market.
Whether it's the big blue sea or the open road, getting away from it all in the age of COVID-19 has meant a bonanza for the folks that sell you what you need to get there. John Carroll, KPBS News.
San Diego's Metropolitan Transit System lost its CEO, Paul Jablonski, in May after he suffered a sudden heart attack. His replacement has a long history with the agency and is now the first woman to lead it. KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen recently spoke with Sharon Cooney about her plans for the future.
Sharon Cooney, thank you so much for speaking with us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So you took the helm at MTS in a time of real crisis. The COVID-19 pandemic has hurt your ridership, it's hurt your finances. What are your priorities as you try to navigate this really difficult time?
Sure. Well, it's been a challenge, but it's been great being part of such a great team at MTS. We get through it together. I think one of my highest priority is to continue with the excellent level of service that we've provided pre-COVID. To make sure that we continue to be the best transit agency, to continue to reach all of the goals for things like ridership as people come back to work, make sure that we have a really great on-time performance, all of the things that matter to people when they're choosing transit for their commute and their daily lives. That's my highest priority.
What are the biggest barriers to recovery for MTS?
Well, I think the big challenge is making sure that our customers and our employees are safe. I mean, that's a high priority as well. It underlies everything we do. We want to make sure that, for instance, if somebody has to now start going into work as the economy opens up, they choose transit because they know we are a safe alternative to an automobile. We've been doing everything from using foggers that immediately disinfect the vehicles to making sure we have germ barriers to protect our drivers on the buses. We're putting those in as we speak, and we'll have the fleet done by the end of August. We are making sure that everybody's wearing a mask. If you're going to choose transit, you're going to wear a mask. And so if you don't have one, we'll provide one for you to use as well.
I want to ask you about your fare enforcement policies. This has been under scrutiny a little bit, or more recently, the Voice of San Diego has reported on a big surge in fare citations that have been issued over the past couple of years, how sometimes those, failing to pay a $2.50 fare can spiral into hundreds of dollars in fines and court fees and things like that. What does that tell you? Does this concern you? And what will fare enforcement look like under your leadership?
So we've already begun working with the board of directors, and through our public security committee, our chair, Monica Montgomery, has really helped us drive forward a couple of new policies. One of them is a diversion program that will start in September. What this will do is it allows people a chance to, first, if you are approached and you don't have a fare on board trolley, we're going to allow you to buy your fare. But then if you can't, then you can expunge the potential citation, and you have 120 days to do so. So the diversion program is intended for those who, for whatever reason, couldn't pay for their fare or didn't pay for their fare, but that they could avoid having to go through any kind of procedure, administrative or otherwise. This I think will be a really helpful for those who feel like they've been somehow being harmed by the way we were doing fare enforcement.
Your predecessor, Paul Jablonski, passed away really suddenly in May, and you had worked with him for many years. What did you learn from him?
Well, I learned a lot about transit, obviously. I wasn't in transit before I started here at MTS, but I learned a lot about the nuts and bolts. But I think more than that, I think I learned the value of team building and really understanding that it's not just one person, it's everybody pulling together to become the most effective, excellent transportation system that we possibly could be. So that's what I learned from him, and I'm hopeful to bring that forward in my own leadership.
All right, well, Sharon Cooney, thank you so much for speaking with KPBS.
You're welcome, and thanks for having me.
That's all for this special edition of KPBS News. For all of us here at KPBS, I'm Maya Trabulsi. Thanks for joining us. Stay safe.